The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
It's a story about a young fellow. Shortly before his marriage, he went to see an Odom Gadol, a great man, because he had something which was weighing very heavily on him. He said, he said to this Odom Gadol, I grew up in Yerushalayim when food was a luxury. We didn't even know what a banana looked like. We were so poor, we were so hungry. And one day when the Rebbe went out of the room, he left some short change, some change on the stender, and I just couldn't resist it. And I took the money and I put it in my pocket. And the Rebbe came back and he saw immediately the money was gone. So he made the whole class face the wall, and one by one he made us turn out our pockets. So what I did was I quickly took the money and I put it into the pocket of the guy standing next to me. So when it came to his turn and he emptied out his pockets, he couldn't believe it was there. He swore to the Rebbe that he didn't steal it, but of course he didn't believe it. And unfortunately he got a name after that as being a thief. And not long after that he dropped out of the Cheder and he became a Chiloni. He went off the derech completely. And he said, how can I go to, it says Yom Chasuna, the day of the Chasna is like a day, Yom Kippur. How can I go through my Yom Kippur with that on my mind? I ruined that person, I ruined that boy's life. So this Odom Gadol says, that reminds me of a very similar incident that happened when I was in Cheder. The Rebbe also made us all stand in a line facing the wall, but when he found the culprit, he didn't let on who it was. He simply took the money, put it back in his pocket, and when he got it to the end of the line, he said, Tov, let us all say together, Hashiveinu Hashem Elokeinu v'nushuva, Chadesh Yomeinu kekedem. He said, you can't blame yourself. You were poor. You were hungry. You're not to blame for that other boy dropping out. And that fellow himself who went off the derech, who became Chiloni, Hashem will understand what he went through and he will judge him accordingly. The person I'm concerned is the Rebbe. Through a single moment of lack of judgment and sensitivity, he ruined that boy's life. We have to be so careful what we say. We have to be so careful. There's another story I heard about Reb Aaron Leib Steinman. The story goes like this. There was a young fellow from a religious family, grew up completely from in Bnei Brak, and one day he decided he wanted to be Chiloni, he wanted to be Fry. He moved out of his parents' apartment in Bnei Brak, and he moved to Tel Aviv to his uncle, who was Chiloni, and he dropped everything. And he started to go out with girls, and he met this non-Jewish girl from Norway who happened to be in Tel Aviv, and he got engaged to her, and he said he's going to marry her. And now this was too much even for the secular uncle. And he said, look, you can't do this without at least going and telling your parents. So the only day that he agreed to go and tell his parents was on a Shabbos. And but he said, if I'm going to go there, it's going to be on my conditions, on what I say. And what were his conditions? Well, Friday night there in Bnei Brak, he saw he was outside there with a cigarette and his iPhone on the balcony for all to see. And Shabbos morning he was out there with the same iPhone and a different cigarette. And come Shalosh Shudas time, his father says to him, I'm going to a shiur of Rav Aaron Leib Steinman. Would you like to come along? So he said, okay. So he goes to the shiur, Rav Steinman gives him the shiur, and after the shiur, Shalosh Shudas, the father brings this young fellow over to Rav Aaron Leib, and he says, this is my son, and I'm sorry to say that he doesn't keep Shabbos anymore. And Rav Aaron Leib said, can I ask you a question? He said, how long have you not been keeping anything? And he said, 2 years. And he said, in those last 2 years, did you ever have hirhurei tshuva? Did you ever have thoughts of tshuva, of becoming religious again? He said, yeah, I suppose so. He said, how many times? He said, well, about 4 times. And how long was each time? He said, well, I don't know, about 10 minutes. So he says, it comes out, said Rabbi Aaron Leib to this fellow, so it comes out in the last 2 years, you had 40 minutes of B'mokum Balei Tshuva Ein Tzadikim Gemurim Omdim Sham. In the place of penitence, in the place of Balei Tshuva, even Tzadikim, complete Tzadikim cannot stand there. He said, for that, I envy you. Good Shabbos. He shook his hand and walked off. Anyway, the guy went back to the flat, the apartment. There was something about Rabbi Aaron Leib's, the way he'd spoken to him, that he couldn't get it out of his mind. He just started to... He went back to Tel Aviv and he decided to postpone the wedding. And then he broke up with the girl. And slowly, he came back in, went back to Bnei Brak, and I believe today that he's learning in Koil. But if you think about it, this story doesn't make any sense at all. Why? Why would this totally Chiloni guy want to go and listen to a shmooze from Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman? And somebody asked him this question. And he said, when I was in Kita Daled, in Cheder, in Bnei Brak, the Rebbe took us all to meet Rabbi Aaron Leib. And the Rebbe had asked Rabbi Aaron Leib, Davka, to do for her, a test, a bechina. And the Rebbe asked Rabbi Aaron Leib to make sure the questions were really simple, because, Kita Daled. So Rabbi Aaron Leib asked each boy a question, and when he answered, he gave him a sweetie. And when it was my time, I went into him, and he asked me a question. It was a simple question. I couldn't answer it. So he asked me even an easier question. I couldn't answer that. He asked me an even easier question. I couldn't answer that. As everybody was leaving Rabbi Aaron Leib's with their sweeties, he called me over and he said, all these boys were asked a question and they answered the question and they got one sweetie. You were asked 3 questions and so you get 3 sweeties. Why? Because in Yiddishkeit we don't get paid for results, we get paid for effort. You tried to answer 3 questions, you get 3 sweeties. Because of those 3 sweeties, because of Rabbi Aaron Leib, that's what made him want to go and hear Rabbi Aaron Leib once again. All those years, that echoed down the years.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org